The quiet hero. Sarah Martinez adjusted her 3-year-old daughter Emma's seatbelt one more time, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. The airplane cabin buzzed with the familiar sounds of passengers settling in for the cross-country flight from Denver to Atlanta. Sarah had been dreading this journey for weeks, knowing that traveling alone with a toddler would test every ounce of her patience and strength. She glanced at the empty middle seat beside her, silently hoping it would remain vacant. The past 6 months had been overwhelming since her divorce was finalized. Between working double shifts at the hospital as a nurse and caring for Emma, Sarah felt like she was barely keeping her head above water. This trip to visit her mother was supposed to be a much-needed break, but already she felt the familiar knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. Emma squirmed in her seat, her small hands reaching for the window shade. "Mama, I want to see outside," she said in her sweet, high-pitched voice that seemed to carry throughout the quiet cabin. "In a minute, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, trying to keep her voice low. She pulled out a small bag of crackers and Emma's favorite stuffed elephant, hoping to keep her daughter occupied during takeoff. As passengers continued boarding, Sarah noticed a well-dressed businessman making his way down the aisle. He was probably in his late 40s, with graying temples and an expensive-looking suit. When he stopped at their row and checked his boarding pass, Sarah's heart sank. The middle seat was his. "Excuse me," he said curtly, not making eye contact as he squeezed past them. Sarah lifted Emma onto her lap to give him more room, but he still seemed annoyed by the inconvenience. The man settled into his seat with obvious displeasure, immediately pulling out his phone and laptop. He shot several disapproving glances at Emma, who was happily babbling to her stuffed elephant. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, even though her daughter was being perfectly normal for a 3-year-old. 20 minutes into the flight, Emma began to get restless. She had finished her crackers and was growing tired of her toys. Her voice gradually became louder as she asked endless questions about the airplane, the clouds, and everything she could see from the window. "Mama, why is the plane so loud? Where are we going again? Can I have juice? Why is that man frowning?" Sarah did her best to answer quietly while digging through her carry-on bag for more distractions. She pulled out coloring books, small toys, and even her phone with downloaded children's videos. Nothing seemed to hold Emma's attention for more than a few minutes. The businessman beside them grew increasingly agitated. He sighed loudly, shifted in his seat, and eventually turned to face Sarah directly. "Could you please control your child?" he said in a voice loud enough for several rows to hear. "Some of us are trying to work, and this constant noise is extremely disruptive." Sarah's face flushed red. She felt the familiar sting of judgment that single mothers know all too well. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "She's just excited about flying. I'm doing my best to keep her quiet." "Well, your best isn't good enough," the man snapped back. "This is ridiculous. Children shouldn't be allowed on planes if they can't behave properly." Emma, sensing the tension, began to whimper. Sarah felt tears welling up in her own eyes as she bounced her daughter gently, trying to soothe her while feeling completely helpless. The man continued his complaints, his voice growing louder and more hostile. Other passengers were now staring, and Sarah wished she could disappear. She had never felt so alone and judged in her life. That's when she noticed the passenger in the window seat. He had been so quiet during the flight that she had almost forgotten he was there. He was an older gentleman, probably in his 60s, with kind eyes and silver hair. He wore a simple navy blue polo shirt and had been reading a paperback novel since takeoff. The older man closed his book slowly and turned toward the businessman. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried an unmistakable authority. "Sir, I think you need to reconsider your tone and your words." The businessman scoffed. "And who exactly are you to tell me what to do?" The older man reached into his wallet and pulled out a small leather case. He opened it briefly, showing an identification card to the businessman. Sarah couldn't see what it was, but she watched the color drain from the businessman's face. "My name is Colonel James Mitchell, United States Air Force," he said quietly. "And I've spent 35 years defending the freedom of families just like this one to travel safely and with dignity." The businessman's mouth fell open slightly. Colonel Mitchell continued, his voice remaining steady and measured. "This young mother is traveling alone with her child, doing the best job she can in a challenging situation. Her daughter is behaving exactly as any normal 3-year-old would. If you cannot show basic human decency and patience, then perhaps you should consider how your own behavior reflects on your character. The businessman mumbled something under his breath but immediately turned away and remained silent for the rest of the flight. Colonel Mitchell then turned to Sarah with a warm smile. "Ma'am, you're doing a wonderful job. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Sarah felt tears of relief rather than frustration now. "Thank you," she whispered. It's been a really difficult year." "I can imagine," Colonel Mitchell said gently. "I raised 4 children with my wife, and I remember those traveling days well. Would Emma like to hear a story about airplanes?" For the next hour, Colonel Mitchell entertained Emma with tales of his flying days, complete with gentle sound effects and animated gestures. He told her about clouds that looked like cotton candy and how pilots navigate using the stars. Emma was completely captivated, sitting quietly and listening with wide-eyed wonder. Sarah watched in amazement as this stranger showed such kindness to her family. She learned that Colonel Mitchell was returning home to Atlanta after visiting his newest grandchild in Colorado. He showed Emma pictures on his phone of his family, including his granddaughter who was just about Emma's age. When the plane began its descent into Atlanta, Emma had fallen asleep against Sarah's shoulder, exhausted from the excitement of the flight and Colonel Mitchell's stories. "I can't thank you enough," Sarah said quietly to the colonel. "You have no idea how much your kindness means to me." Colonel Mitchell smiled. "We all need a little help sometimes. That's what community is about, looking out for each other." As passengers began deplaning, the businessman hurried past them without making eye contact. Colonel Mitchell helped Sarah gather her bags and even carried Emma's stuffed elephant. At the gate, as they prepared to go their separate ways, Colonel Mitchell handed Sarah a small piece of paper with his email address. "If you ever need anything, or if Emma wants to hear more airplane stories, please don't hesitate to reach out," he said. "My wife and I would love to stay in touch." Sarah hugged him tightly, feeling like she had encountered an angel in disguise. As she watched him walk away, she realized that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. The world still held good people, quiet heroes, who choose kindness over indifference, understanding over judgment. Emma stirred in her arms and smiled sleepily. "Mama, I like the airplane man. He was nice." "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah said, her heart full of gratitude. "He was very nice indeed." Walking through the airport toward her mother's waiting embrace, Sarah felt lighter than she had in months. Sometimes, she thought, the kindness of strangers can remind you that you're never truly alone in this world.